Good morning, everybody. This is a special Tuesday morning West Coast time spatial program. I'm your host, David Livingston. Thank you very much. This is a 60-minute hard stop program, so I'm going to omit most all of the upfront business, but I do want to say that I'll introduce the guest in a moment, but Manuel Cuba is with us, this gentleman here, Marshall Martin, John Jossi, and we have a telephone caller using an area code from Las Vegas. So that's where I am. So maybe we could have coffee sometime if you're actually in Las Vegas. So today we have a special show. Our guest is in Luxembourg. And I would like to introduce everybody to Guy Schumann. He is the founder and CEO of a company we've been talking about recently on the space show, RSS-HYDRO. And if you want to go to their website, it would be .lu on the end of that. Um, and he has uh, quite the career. Um, he has done lecturing and professoring at Caltech. He's been a research specialist there and with NASA JPL and also at UCLA. His full bio is on the Space Show website, spaceshow.com. And he does things that affect safety and tragedies and climate catastrophes from space. And I will let Guy tell you kind of about what he does and how he sort of transitioned from academia to founding this company. Guy, it's great to have you on the Space Show, and we welcome you. And how did you go from Caltech, UCLA, professorships, research people, all sorts of academia into forming this company? Why did you do it? Was it hard to do? And what is your company doing?
Okay, thank you, David, and thanks very much for having me on this show. It's a great pleasure to be here. I've watched a couple of your shows, so it's really great. It's great to have everybody else on the show as well. And thanks for already talking about my company before. Um, Myself, like you rightly said, I'm more the academic background, and a lot of my former peers and colleagues see me as that. Like I'm still the scientist to them rather than the business guy. So, um, I come exactly from that background, as you mentioned. I've been at Bristol University in UK, first professorship, then moved on to a postdoctoral position at Caltech and UCLA, where I was actually hosted by JPL in close to Pasadena. So it's really great. You can imagine as a European going that way is really fantastic. And the name NASA, I mean, I don't need to say it here, for any Europeans, like the dream to end up one day at JPL, you know. And so that's how it all started. I was involved in research projects in a lot of things that are related to disasters, risk, from space data, looking at hydrology mostly because I'm a hydrologist by training. So I look at floods, I look at rainstorms, I look at drought systems as well, more the wet side of the hydrology. And then I got in US, I really got a taste of the private sector as well, because in US it's actually much easier than in Europe to move from a research environment into the private sector because they collaborate a lot more. There's a lot more, of course, there's always a lot more money available in the US in all sense of the word. There's a lot more freed when you look at the disaster. NASA comes in, DoD funding comes in to look at hurricane destructions. And I got involved a lot of that using space assets from NASA. So using public mission data, looking at those things and helping people. And I always love to do that. Hydrology, how can I help people when there's a flood? I've done that since university. I always loved that. But in the US, as I said, I moved into the private sector as well. And there's a lot of private companies working with JPL and NASA to look at airborne missions using airplanes to calibrate satellite missions. So I got involved with one of those companies, Remote Sensing Solutions, which merged with Tomorrow.io, which a lot of people may know. So I have that network also in the private sector. And that's how I started having the taste for company. And then I moved always a bit home during the holidays and stuff. So COVID was the one that broke it for me. And I couldn't easily travel back after Christmas that year. And I just thought, okay, I started this company slowly, RSS-HYDRO in Luxembourg. Now is probably the time to invest a bit more time in it. But I still stay connected with the US a lot. I have a US affiliation in a company there that I'm not owning, but I work with those guys on research projects. It's ImageCat in the US, in California. They do similar things, more focused on earthquake and fires as well. And yeah, I got a taste for it, and it's hard. You asked about whether it's hard or not. It's hard because I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a business person. I don't have an MBA. I have a PhD, and it teaches me how to use hydrology, and it doesn't teach me how to make money in a business. So it's a very awkward world for me when I started. Yeah.
Um, Given your focus on droughts and hydrology, I'm just curious, and we don't have to spend any time on this. If you pay attention to the drought in the western part of the United States, what's going on, say, with Lake Mead and in how it's losing its water here in Vegas and its sister lake in Arizona, Lake Powell, because I see space pictures of the lakes all the time. They post them. I don't know who's getting them or where they're getting, but I'm sure the images are widely available. But do you have any input into any of the jurisdictions about drought management on Colorado River water and what's going on in the western part of the U.S.?
I mean, first of all, hydrologists, yes, but as I said before, I'm focused more on the wet part. So there are a lot more specialists out there that know much better than me. But I can tell you one thing, and this is no fun. I came to California uh, when the drought had already started, the big drought, and I lived for 7 years nonstop in California. I have seen 2 days of rain during that 7-year period. And so this is the big drought for me. I have lived it, and it's actually quite horrible because you will always think, well, it's great to have sun every day, but the rain is not a bad thing. So, and because of that long drought systems, and then the valley in California that's very well known for its, you know, fruit growing and nuts and vegetables, everything grows there. So there's a lot of groundwater abstractions. There's a lot of management for water resources. And when I was there, there was also not a lot of snow cover left in California. So, but when I left, so maybe started around 3 years ago, you started to see a few atmospheric rivers, what they call them. So the atmosphere bringing in a lot of vapor in the atmosphere, a lot of moisture, and then causing a lot of rain. So I was lucky not caught in the fires, and I was also lucky not to be caught in the floods that happened right after the fires. So hydrology is a cycle, but actually if you use a lot and if you use too much water, and if then the climate also doesn't play into your hands, like you get this 7-year or 8-year drought, you have a problem with the reservoirs, like the lakes. You know, you're gonna have a problem that is not easy to restore because you're gonna have to have the water available for people. And as you know, where you are close to Vegas, it's a big city. It's a big demand on water. It's big demand on electricity. Energy is demanding water, you know, electricity generation, everything. Um, it's just very tough to get out of a drought. And, you know, I think people in California, in Southern California, and also in Nevada know it very well. It's very hard.
Yeah, so they draw
So,
their water primarily from the Colorado River.
yes,
And so both Southern California, his population has just blossomed like you wouldn't believe, as has
yes,
Vegas, and they're trying to pull more and more,
yeah,
and to meet an amazingly rising population. with all
Yes,
sorts of uses that were never contemplated. So
absolutely.
yeah, it is an issue, and you can see the water level lines on the rocks in the lakes where it used to be. Um, what is the main focus of your company? Is it hydrology and flooding? Do you get into climate change at all, or do you kind of leave that on the sidelines? Or is fire, where do you see your company mostly focusing on, and what's easiest to do using space resources?
Yes, it's a very good question. My company, I would say we it took a while for us to actually get to a mission and a vision and a clear roadmap. But I think one thing is clear: we want to fill a gap in the market. If you talk business markets, so we identified, for example, in disasters, there's clearly a gap in the rapid response, first insights. So if you are a first responder, or if you are somebody from FEMA looking for, how do you get information in a fire like the LA fires? How do you get information in a hurricane like Harvey? How do you get that information fast? And looking at for situational awareness, you want to just have an information that tells you how big is the event, how damaging is the event, where do we need to go first? Um, this is what we wanted to come in, fill this gap, be fast, give rapid insights very clearly, and stay also affordable, because budget is also a question. It's strained already, so we fill that. We're starting to fill that gap quite nicely, I would say, and we're using spaceborne data because it is actually quite an affordable resource in terms of acquiring the data, buying the data. I mean, launching a satellite is expensive, but once they're up there, the data they can create can become quite affordable. So we're using that. It also gives you a large overview of the situation. And we now have technology that allows you to process very fast on board or on the ground. So we also process actually on the satellite, we're able to do that. And we actually get the information down very fast. So we're very active in flooding. That's our main expertise. So flood mapping, monitoring globally, looking at all sorts of data, and then also helping cities and people to mitigate, protect themselves against floods. But we also do fires. Fires because from a thermal perspective, the heat is actually easier to monitor from space than the rain or the flood. Mm-hmm. So we also do the fires just because we can help with that. And then you were asking also, what is the easy one? I think there is no easy one, but it's definitely true to say that fires are easier to monitor than flooding
Do you have
from a space perspective.
do you have your own satellites, or where are you getting the data from?
No, actually, we're getting the data mostly from other satellite providers and operators, like also public mission data from NASA and the European Space Agency, ESA, and Japanese. We're using all sorts of satellites where we can get it. And we also have partnerships with private satellite operators. Like we can get data from Spire Global, from ISI, from others, from Planet if we need to, but we tend to stay with public available data. We also get data from geostationary meteorological satellites. So like NOAA is operating and EUMETSAT in Europe, because they can monitor very effectively as well these disasters. We do have, also we're starting to buy into our own space assets from other service providers. Like we own, for example, with Deorbit in Italy, we own literally a space computer. So it's like a box, like a satellite box going around with a computer inside, with a rack, and has a few sensors on top. Can also get data from other satellite operators, and we process on there. So we do buy into our own services right now in space, but we don't build a satellite.
What is the altitude of most of the satellites that you're getting data from?
It's the low Earth orbit. It's like the 700 kilometer, 500 to 700, 800 kilometer. But as I said, we do use geostationary. Then you go into the tens of thousands of kilometers, or sorry, yeah, you have to divide that a bit to get into feet, but or multiply for that matter. Yeah, so the geostationary are very, very high up, like 36,000. I think, kilometers, but they have the ability to see half of the Earth at one time. So it's very effective for very widespread disasters like fires. You know, you can all of Canada, we know it can burn at once. So you have to have these satellite capabilities to capture all of it. Um, yeah, so this is us. As I said, we also do use simulation models for flooding, so we can simulate effects like climate. Um, we can also use AI to visualize those results in a very human interpretable way, so photorealistic way. We work a lot and collaborate a lot with big techs like NVIDIA, Google, Microsoft as well, to leverage their technology to do things better and faster.
Do
Yes.
you see the future evolving to the point um, where you can be not just preventative, but really sort of forecasting and seeing the future with an amazing degree of accuracy rather than coming in after the event has already occurred?
Actually, yeah, it's a very good question, and thanks for asking that, because in hydrology we do have access to forecasting tools that we also use. Um, we also collaborate with others that bring the data to build those models. And one such model actually that we are about to fine tune, it started off as a NASA project when I was still in the US, with a lot of colleagues there that have moved on since, but we still stick together. We're building that model out, and we're hoping to be able to use that as well in our services. It's one of these open source tools that you can commercialize on and use, and do all sort of things with, like a lot of these NOAA weather models that exist, where the weather community and the weather industry built a multi-billion-dollar market on these weather apps. So that's actually where we kind of hoping to get into a similar setting with hydrology disasters, so that people can actually easily interpret complex data and complex models. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you one more quick question, and then I know Marshall wants to get in on it. But um, we talk about commercial space a lot on the space show in all different aspects. And one area we always talk about is the regulatory environment, and we need to keep it pretty free and flowing and open so that it doesn't stifle innovation and creativity, all sorts of different things. But we also seem to have the understanding and feeling that Luxembourg, with their commercial space operation and what they do, is pretty easygoing, business friendly, great on regulations. What is the facts? What's the reality of the regulatory environment for private sector space businesses in Luxembourg?
So I think there's advantages and disadvantages of being in Europe. Of course, Europe is much more regulated for businesses than in the US, for example. It's simply like talking about contracts, employing people. It's very, very different. It's a lot harder in Europe. What is easy, relatively easy in Luxembourg is, Luxembourg space industry is very, very much driven by business needs, business wishes, and economy from the government perspective. It's less so into like research, and we don't have a NASA or ESA in Luxembourg. We have a Luxembourg Space Agency that's more business focused and economy focused. So return on investment is very important, and I think that makes it a bit easier in Luxembourg to get into this startup. At the beginning, Luxembourg government also has a lot of these accelerator programs, of which I actually participated in one for big data and HPC, high performance computing. And we actually exited as winners on that, thanks to people like Manuel here on the show. He was our coach actually, and now he's a shareholder of the company. We kept him on after the accelerator program. We love these programs, but one not so great thing about these programs is because they come with a lot of administrative burden, because there is some part of regulation, but in terms of space, I would say Luxembourg is fairly okay, but I can see other countries would be easier. For example, in the US, getting to investments in the US is way easier. Getting into these new space investments is a lot easier. But Luxembourg is doing a great job. I think Europe is starting to pick up the pace. But of course, running after some some country like the US or China in terms of space is, you can run, but you're not going to run fast enough. But
Really,
Europe is picking up. I mean, yes, we're doing nice things, but we're not fast enough.
capital flows and taxation are favorable to businesses in Luxembourg.
Taxation, I would say I'm looking at Manuel here. It's
Hmm.
still favorable, but we I can tell you a quote from my bank actually. We're not in the 80s any longer. I got that message once from the bank. Indeed, in the 80s it was much easier from a banking system and a tax haven system that we used to be called. Not anymore. I think it's a lot easier still to open a business in Luxembourg. Very definitely true. Also from tax perspective, but we have to adhere to comply with the European regulations on from Brussels on taxes, and it used to be much easier, let's say, but it's still easy. It's still favorable to come to Luxembourg than any other European country, I would say,
Marshall,
except maybe some of them.
Marshall,
Yeah.
go ahead, please.
One of the problems in farming is how dry is the soil or how saturated the soil is. Do you have some methodology of in space of actually measuring the soil hydrology? And then once you have a rainfall, that means you're better able to predict floods, I think.
Yes, absolutely so. And actually, that's soil moisture is one of those variables that is very important, is very fast changing. Like within hours, like soil can be completely different in terms of soil moisture. But indeed, you have a lot of space assets that map those. You have scientific missions from NASA and ESA that map those. You've also commercial missions now that look a lot into soil moisture. For example, you have HydroSat is a California registered company. It's headquartered in California. They have a Luxembourg office. They also have people from JPL, I believe, on their board, or that used to be at JPL. They know a lot about soil moisture. You also have Spire that do produce soil moisture products. We can also do soil moisture because, as you quite rightly so, if the rain continues, it's a very big antecedent condition of the flood generation. So if you have soil that is already fully saturated and it continues to rain, it will cause a flood. If you have soil that is very hardened because it was drying for too long, the same thing happens. You have rainfall, it just runs off. So these two components, we understand them well. Indeed, we can use either models or space data to look at soil moisture. Indeed, that's actually part of one of our applications called HydroSense. We have a legacy in the Sense word. So we have FloodSense to monitor floods from space. We have FireSense for fires, and we have HydroSense that looks at rainfall, soil, and parameters to look at rainfall runoff conditions. Indeed, yes.
And then the second part is after it rains and you have all the data, the biomass growth. Of course, I'm interested in crops and how well can you predict I think Europe is barley and, and,
Yes.
and rye and so on like that.
Yeah, the things you need to make a good whiskey or bourbon, right? The rye and barley. Yes, I see what you mean. I studied in Scotland for 9 years, so I know a bit about that. Yes, indeed, our HydroSense application actually takes vegetation into account, so change of vegetation. But actually from space, it's very hard to distinguish between these two crops, for example, because unless the spectral characteristics is very different, I'm not a plant specialist. I think these two may be quite similar. Indeed, you can look at these vegetations and you can look at yield estimations from space. You can estimate that with models. So we do some of that as well because it's very hydrology linked. I mean, if you don't have rainwater, like Luxembourg, for example, or a lot of systems in Europe are not irrigated agriculture, but they rely on rainfall only. And we need to monitor that. And indeed, soil moisture and vegetation and crop monitoring is something we build into our hydrological applications. Yes.
Guy,
So,
oh, go ahead.
sorry. So you mentioned you can detect vegetation. What about the ratio of living vegetation to debris and decaying vegetation that would cause a fire? And I'm wondering if a municipality has access to your data, if they can say, okay, I need to go into this forest and remove this, assuming they'd want to do that and would be allowed to, and to prevent fires. How does your system help with forest management?
Um, it's not so much our expertise, but as I said before, in terms of the fires, for example, if a city was to onboard with us to do the fire monitoring application and they wanted to know something about fuel, so vegetation available for the fire to burn, we can build that in. That is actually a variable that is very robust in remote sensing or in satellite science. Is this vegetation index. It's a very big field, and indeed it's built on the principle of the greener the vegetation is, the more chlorophyll it produces, and it measures the amount of chlorophyll. So if the vegetation dies and can be easier burned, you can have these ratios, these vegetation indices tell you a lot about that. So we can build that in. So far, we've not had this request from people looking into monitoring fires, but I think it's, as always, it's the problem that maybe those that look at the disasters and need to monitor fires in a city are not the same necessarily that look at the management of a forest. If they were the same team, things were a lot easier. But I think there's also this that we don't reach necessarily the teams in the cities that we should, because indeed, if you build out, if you set these requirements to us, we would build that in. But we always need to work with those experts as well. We need to understand what they need, what they have as requirements. And once we have those, we can build that in. Yes, indeed. That would be very good to know, like linking it also into predictive mode, because once you have the wind parameter, the atmospheric conditions, plus you have the vegetation availability, you can actually start to project where fires would happen if you know where they did happen in the past. For example, we can provide that information easily enough. And that's what we're currently working on. We're actually currently working on a fire spreading mechanism. So for our application, indeed, because people get very interested in predictive and also using it for management, as you say.
Guy, I'm going to give you a real life scenario question. And maybe some people think it's tongue in cheek. And first of all, I apologize to listeners beyond the borders of the western part of the U.S. and California, but I think this will cover everything and maybe be a little bit broader than what John asked. But as soon as this show ends, you get a conference call from Mayor Bass of LA and Governor Newsom, and they say, we've just been listening to you on the space show. So California has a fire problem, a forest problem. We wholeheartedly believe in climate change and think it's an existential threat to California and the whole world. And we've got CO2 and rising seawaters in California. And we have this horrible drought, both in the northern part of the state as well. And our utilities are going out of sight with cost, and we're having a hard time managing all of this. So we've heard about your company. What would your proposal be if you helped us manage all of the risks that we're talking about from space? And what would your 3 or 4 or 5 or 6-step plan comprise if you were to do something comprehensive like that?
Okay. It's not too hard to answer, because one thing I learned very well at being at JPL is when you have an immense problem like you just outlined, and it's real. I mean, I've lived through the drought I just told you, and I know some of the infrastructure could be better, but it's very costly to change things. I mean, LA alone is so big. If you want to change some hard infrastructure to protect against stormwater, I mean, it's a lot of money you need. Yes, there is money, but also these infrastructures, we're talking about billions of investments, if not more, for one single city. I would do what NASA does when it has a problem. You get what they call like the A team. Why not get the best of the best so if you want to stay in the company world, I would say we're also very good at RSS-HYDRO to build partnerships. We build partnerships with big techs like NVIDIA. We build also partnerships with Spire. We have NDAs with almost all of those guys I mentioned before. I think I would build a consortium of companies and come up with a solution, and also build into a comprehensive solution that would become affordable and help cities manage. Because what you mentioned is we need basically every expertise to manage the problems that you mentioned, and these are real problems. And we could build this with different companies, just go in partnerships. And this is also what needs to change in the new space. It's not anymore something that only a few can get to, space. I mean, I told you before, we are a software as a service company, a SaaS company, if you like. But we are in the space sector because we use space data, but we just got ourselves into these space cloud services with the Orbit. We bought a space-based computer in a very simple way, but we also work with Andurosat. They also have a US office. We work with these people that build satellite constellations. So we can now, a company like us, having never raised a Series A, B, or C investment, we can now play in space. And I think that allows us to go in partnerships and build comprehensive solutions to tackle problems that you mentioned. I think the biggest problem is that even if we had this comprehensive solution, I would like nothing more than talk to the mayor of LA. I'm not sure the mayor would give me a call.
But it's another issue, of course.
I would say yes, immediately. If we get a call from this mayor, immediately we do something. If we get a call from New York, absolutely, let's do something. If we get a call from Houston, absolutely, let's do something. But are they calling? Will they be calling? If they are, I can tell you, I'll be the first one to get a consortium together to work towards the budget they have, and we come up with a solution. The biggest problem is always for us, also back home, we work a lot with cities. To get into the city is fairly easy. To get them to understand that they have a problem is also easy. To get them actually to acknowledge that they need your solution is also easy. What is very hard is to go through the process of the budget versus when can you deliver, what's available, do they understand it, can they use it to build it into their action plans, into their planning. That's very, very hard. And then to keep those actions going for the next politician that will take the city, that is also very, very hard. If the next mayor changes, maybe cancels your subscription to the wonderful service you had before, and then you're done. So it's also, I think it's a thing we need to give this, go to political sustainability almost in these issues, right? You need the next mayor to do the same thing because it's just what's needed to solve these problems that you mentioned.
Is our space technology ready to play like you're talking about, or do we need to see some advancements and improvements in space technology to really play well?
I don't think we need technological improvements. I think the technology is all there. We need to bring the pieces together in partnerships and in technology as well. And I wrote actually an online article called, I don't remember the title, but it was calling about a cocktail of data from space, a cocktail of like almost democratizing space infrastructure. And so when you are like us, have a software that could be executed in space, we need to play with the guys that can give us the infrastructure to do so, but still stay very, very affordable. So we don't need to change our pricing a lot for our public customers, for example, or other customers that want our prices to stay quite low. So we need to move towards that. I mean, new space is great, but we need to get away for selling a single image or a single pixel for a lot of money to a few. We need to get to a stage where people actually just get the insight they need, but very affordably, and it should be available all the time because the technology, I believe, is there.
So maybe some of those other participants in the show want to get on the game, but here's a dilemma I see because I meet a lot of people here in Las Vegas, and in fact wherever I go, and they don't really know anything about space. I don't even know if they have a concept that Earth is in space. Um, I mean, it's really that pathetic. I mean, they hear the news and sometimes they hear Neil deGrasse Tyson or other people speak, but they really don't know anything. So if you start talking to them and saying, from space, we have all these capabilities that can help on flooding and fire and disaster. We've been doing disaster shows, especially to help people that may be missing and other stuff for years on the space show. They're clueless. And I don't think even when I talk to them about it, they really understand it. So I don't think the governments that need to take this information and use it have much of a pressure from their citizenry to update what they're doing by, hey, why aren't you using all this great space data? I don't think California gets a lot of citizen pressure. I doubt that Mayor Bass has had one letter about that, and probably the same for Gavin Newsom. So I think there's to really see this play a role in benefiting people around the world. I think there has to be some way for people to really understand what we're talking about and what these capabilities are, so they can make it campaign issues, make it such that the mayors and the governors or the principals have pressure to employ this in the legislature. I'll bet there's not one person in the California legislature that probably has a clue about this. And when I see the drought information about Las Vegas in the press and the pictures and everything, there's not one word about how space resources could help manage this and Colorado River water and usage better. I mean, maybe it's already being deployed. I don't know.
Um,
I think it's a real stumbling block
yeah,
for your industry.
yeah, I think one easy way to say that satellites are crucial is if you, let's say you unplugged all the satellites that look at Earth to deliver some data. From one day to the next, you would not know whether it's going to rain the next day or not. You would not know what the waves in the ocean would be like if you wanted to surf those waves. You would also not know anymore very easily um, whether you need an umbrella or not, simply because all the weather predictions, all the ocean predictions are all getting better because of the observations we have of the Earth from space that are then assimilated into these models and get better. I can tell you this for sure. If you unplugged all the satellites, the weather forecasting would be done, and you wouldn't know whether you're facing a drought or flood. You wouldn't know whether you would need an umbrella, like I said, or not. You wouldn't know whether you could surf the ocean in 2 days. You would just always need to go out there and look, because you wouldn't have any forecasting capabilities the way we have them now. A lot of this is because of these meteorological satellites and other satellites that provide these data nonstop.
I understand your company is having a financial offering or a public share offering. Is that correct?
We're not publicly traded, but I'm always open to bring in people that have the money that want something from the company. I'm very open to that. It's just not very easy to find the right investors that could work with us, and we could work with them. But we're not on the stock exchanges, you say. We're not on the public shares yet, but I think I would not be against going there. But then we have a public obligation, right? We start to become, we have a mission that is bigger because we have to please everyone that can buy shares, which would be literally anybody that would like to. So I really feel for those companies that want to do this, because it's a big thing, but I can also see the benefits, especially a company like us going into disasters, risk. I think it'd be cool to have public shareholders, indeed.
Well,
Maybe
see,
one day we get there.
you take private investment money then,
Yeah,
correct?
yes. Yes, we
Like
would if we get the right. And we're talking to investors. Not often, but we're talking to investors, and indeed we're not against that. It's just that we want to get the right type of investor for us, like everybody else, I think, that runs a company.
Marshall, is your hand up for a question?
I have an interesting question. Elon Musk is talking about artificial intelligence and how it's going to solve all the problems in the world. Me being a hardcore 40-year experience in programming, I kind of suspect he's overshooting. But that brings up an interesting question for what you're trying to do is what is the balance between real intelligence and the artificial intelligence?
Yes, I think it's a very good question indeed, because we are using AI as well, because it helps. It's a great tool. It helps in a lot of ways, but you need to use it correctly, I think, because otherwise a lot of things can go wrong. So I'll give you an example. So where we see things going is, let's say we are able with our application to warn everyone and monitor everything, and message to people in whatever way. I think AI, for example, is great. In these large language models would be fantastic. You can just plug it in and it would take the message or the interpretation of the data that is typical in one language, for example, English, and it could transform that in no time in any other dialect in the world. So the person whoever reaches that information reaches to would understand it, no problem. That's one example. I think AI is really great. The other thing is it can help you understand a lot of things a lot faster, but it works a lot better with you if you are the expert. So like you say, like yourself, if you want to get into AI, I think you could manage AI really well if you ask it for your field of expertise. Because if you are the prompt engineer, but you are the expert in the field you want to use AI, I think AI can be very powerful. Where we need to be careful with AI is if people use it that don't really know what's coming out of it and don't really have the expertise in that field they use it in. That is a bit worrisome. But I think you mentioning Elon Musk and all this maybe overshooting stuff, I think there's also a lot of, we always need to move on as humanity. We always want to go to the next big step, big thing that's happening. And I think in the 50s, 60s we just need to get to space, right? Now we need to get AI in space. We need to get data centers in space, whatever it is. But I think we just push for the next frontier all the time. But we need to be all the time also very careful what we do. Because if not, we're going to live into the real Terminator world. And that's not where people want to be. Indeed. But we are actually quite close to James Cameron's idea. So whatever he does have good ideas.
What is your 5 and 10-year plan for RSS-HYDRO? Where do you see yourselves down the road?
I think I really would like the company, of course, like everybody else, to do really well, but I also want to be somewhere where people see us as the one that can deliver critical information very fast to almost anybody that needs it, but also to the big guys so we can live happily ever after and make some real money as well. So in 5 years, I think so far, if I may say this on the show, so you start always with very little money. You have no money when you start a company. Unless you're rich, then it's okay. But we started with no money. We doubled every time revenue since, and the projections are not looking bad either. They look into doubling every year. So in 5 years, I think we would be really doing very well. And that's probably the time when we discuss these things like public offerings, like you say. That may be a good step in 5-10 years. Maybe we should do that, because I think the things we do is for public mostly, but it's also for private corporates that are in emergency management or reinsurance as well. Yeah, I think I would like to see the company be quite big, but also not lose the impact and mission for what we stand for. And that is help in disasters when it matters most. So, yeah.
Looking into the future, if we actually had lunar settlement going on, so I'm not talking about just a habitat, but it really was an attraction for people and for businesses. So, who knows how many years in the future. Could your assets be, could these same assets be deployed in space in a lunar orbit and help in planning and managing lunar settlement development? Now, I know they don't have the same issues, so I'm not telling you need to look for floods on the moon. I'm not, that naive. But could you play a role in lunar imaging to people on the surface of the moon in developing their communities and their resources and whatever else was unique to being in a lunar settlement?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because actually it is fairly possible, because if you think about it more in a more abstract way, what we do is we deploy our software already on space assets to interpret imagery very fast of Earth. Now, if you gave us imagery of the lunar surface and you were looking for flat surfaces to build on, let's say, you could adapt our algorithms to do just that. And indeed, then you could use this whole service infrastructure we built to do just that. Indeed, that may not be us, that may be others, but indeed, I would also like our company to be like building a sort of framework for these kind of things. Indeed, because I don't know where the world is going. I don't know where population is going. Maybe indeed we use the moon as a stop to Mars. I don't know. Maybe people need to know a bit of that. And funnily enough, you say it doesn't flood on Mars. When I was at JPL, there are sometimes people that do crazy stuff, but we ran a flood model, a hydraulic model, fluid dynamic model on Mars, putting a lot of water in, and then artificially, and then seeing what this model would do if we adjust the gravity to the Mars gravity. So we ran a flood on Mars, indeed, with JPL people, with our software that we used at JPL to simulate floods on Earth. We just thought it would be great to try that on Mars, and indeed we published that paper. So, I mean, you can do these kind of things on other planets just to teach yourself what has been there millions of years ago, or what could be there again. And the question of water of Mars, was a big question years ago at NASA. So we did, therefore, model floods on Mars. We thought, why not? Maybe, if they find water, floods can be there again. So we did that.
I know here on going back to Earth, satellite imaging is very definitely used in oil and gas exploration, archaeology for potential dig sites, for monitoring CO2, leakages from industry and different things. Are you using the same resources? Do you have to compete for satellite resources? Like if you wanted time on James Webb or Hubble, you'd be competing for time on those telescopes. So are there enough satellites that some can be dedicated to your specific uses, or are you all trying to use the same satellites and you have to compete for time on them?
That's a very good question, because indeed you do request images sometimes from private operators, and then you get into a list already of queue. You get into a queue. If you ask for the same location and they sell those pixels, like I said before, in a proprietary way, in an exclusive way, you may not get that same image again. So indeed, there is sometimes that fear that, okay, somebody's asking that location already, and they just are more of an important customer, or indeed they could be any government that has priority on those satellites. In some ways, yes, you compete in that sense, I would say. Now, your question about are there enough satellites? I think definitely yes. It's always the same. I'm not sure we're using all of the capacity. I'm not sure we're using all of that data that is acquired every day from everywhere. I'm not sure. I think we're using about probably 20% of all that data. I don't know that, but I know indeed that we, from public missions, NASA and ESA, we're not using all the data they produce. It's just too much now. AI and big infrastructure has changed that. We can now indeed use a lot more percentage of the data to interpret faster. Indeed, that has been a good thing about AI and computer infrastructure.
Uh, Listeners, I want to remind everyone we have a hard stop for this show, unfortunately, because we could go on for a long time, and that's about
Yes,
9 minutes away. So for those of you that are in the Zoom meeting with us, if you have a comment or question, you need to put it out there. And what have we omitted or forgotten that we should talk about? But first, before you answer that question, it's kind of a summary question. John Jossi has a question for you.
Yeah, I didn't hear specifically on your earlier discussions, but what percentage of your customers are insurance companies using your data for risk management?
At the moment, we don't really serve to insurance yet. We do serve to platforms. We don't know exactly who's using that data, but we don't specifically chase the insurance sector yet. And there's a good reason because we don't necessarily, our focus is not in that niche sector. It's not the response, it's not the responsibility of the insurance, the rapid disaster response where we want to focus on. Disasters are more like insurances are more after the fact interested, but we are getting there. We are transforming some of our application to respond to that. And to do that, we actually collaborate with a lot of reinsurance and parametric insurances to see how they could use our data or how we need to transform it to go a bit more into this recovery phase where insurance gets more interested in. And we're doing that currently on a project basis with insurance customers. So at the moment, our real paying customers are not insurance yet, although some of them may be on platforms. We don't know that. So we are serving more state, county, and city level clients. And we are indeed also serving sometimes humanitarian-based clients, so NGOs, but rarely because they're just not very happy to pay a lot. But we also transformed part of our company into an NGO now, where we can serve with our applications also humanitarian crisis in the world. Because indeed, when places flood, sometimes there's just no money to pay these services, and then we can't come in as a business to solve that because we need to get paid. But we can do some of that with our applications easy, and then we just want to give those data, and we can do that with an NGO. So we're starting that as well. So the humanitarian crisis was not much discussed in this show, but it's something we also want to serve, but we don't do that through the for-profit company. We do it through the NGO.
So
that we found.
It seems like your models are mainly reactive as opposed to being proactive to prevent, like we talked about, forest management and certainly insurance. You know, they're going to want to know how to set rates in floodplains and that sort of thing.
Yes,
So it sounds like your data is mainly, okay, after a disaster happens, here you go, here's the data.
yeah, we
And
can also, in flooding, we can do it before the disaster to mitigate, to protect. And so indeed, their insurances get interested as well. But so far, we're mostly working with cities as clients and real estate. So people that build large assets in cities, those are our clients, yes. Insurance, not so much, but in flooding, indeed, we could serve those as well. Yes, and we do have one-off contracts or projects with those type of entities, organizations, insurance and parametric insurance.
What is fire sense and flood sense?
This is so it's sensing the flood or the fire. So these are all the Earth observation based applications that we have. So FireSense is for fire monitoring, FloodSense is for flood monitoring, and FloodSense is very machine learning driven, AI driven, because it just enables us to look for images and do fast processing, and do also processing of flooding in all different landscapes of the world. So our applications are basically globally applicable. So it doesn't matter to us whether you live in the US, Vietnam, or Europe. We want to help with monitoring and better responding to disasters like fires and floods.
Do you so you said you would welcome these calls, so our telephone listener, who I encourage to ask you the question directly, but since that's not happening, let me call it back up on email. And I don't know whether he's tongue in cheek, but it's actually a decent question for anyone listening to this show. So regardless of whether you are uh, not specific to Las Vegas, although he is in Las Vegas, he says, ask our guest if the satellites can see evaporation rates. If they can, maybe we can figure out a way for Dr. Schumann to meet with our Las Vegas mayor, since evaporation rates are an issue here in this area. But again, I'm expanding it to any area, anybody listening to this show, any place. It doesn't even have to be in the United States. If you do face these issues, why not see if you can introduce your elected officials? Uh, it doesn't, maybe people in the legislature or the equivalent,
Mm.
to having a meeting to understand better what they can do. So
Indeed, I
evaporation
would.
rates, can you do that?
Yes, indeed, we can actually. It's part of the hydrology. It's the soil moisture evaporation, rainfall. We can do those things from space. And actually, I'd be happy to talk to the to the mayor. I also wanted to add, we do serve a lot of US already. Like we work with companies in Florida on flood modeling. We work we did some work on the LA fires, but more on the LA floods on fires as well. We building use cases there. We are on the stormwater show early February. One of my colleagues is attending stormwater in Orange County, Anaheim,
Uh-huh.
where it's all about drainage systems, cities, storms, flooding. So we are in that expo, where we just show what we do in flooding, in stormwater management. And this is, I think, 2nd and 3rd of February in Anaheim. So if anybody listening is around, go and see Patricia. She's there. So she's from the team. Alice from the team is also there. So go and see them. We're very much used to US, also US regulations, FEMA regulations in flooding. We know them. We've done private work for private landowners as RSS-HYDRO from Luxembourg. We've used, because we understand the US methodologies, rainfall, and the US methodologies on flooding. We use the US Army Corps of Engineers flood model software as well. We do work with those guys. So let us know. I mean, we are very well around in the US as well. We have customers there too.
For our phone listener, I believe his name is Chris. This program is going to be an hour. So, and if we stripped it from video to audio, it's a really, really small file. So, if you do have connections to the mayor or to people in politics, unfortunately, I don't, or maybe fortunately for my sanity, send them the MP3. Tell them where the video is and say, here's the audio. Listen to what they can do about these problems. If you are interested, we'll connect you. Maybe somebody in their departments would actually listen to all or most of a 1 hour MP3, because they could do that on their cell phone pretty easily. Any concluding comments? Anything we should have talked to you about but forgot, or that you want to say for this go around?
I think from my perspective, it's perfect. I liked it a lot. I don't have anything to add. I don't think you missed a lot. Definitely not a lot. We may have missed some important points for some listeners, but I think it was great. Perfect. I don't have any comments.
Well, it's been a pleasure meeting to you. I hope we can talk to you
Likewise.
if you decide to get a client in the Vegas area and come down here to have fun on the strip and the casinos and go water skiing or something. Let me know. I'd love to meet you in person.
Great.
So,
Definitely let you know. Definitely let you know when I'm in the area.
and
Yes,
and, and bring Manuel with you.
I do that.
So
Definitely.
we can have a nice, and we'll see if Chris is available and bring him on the gathering.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, listeners. You can see on the website for our Sunday program and our Friday program. So everybody have a great week, as we like to say. Keep looking up, and thanks
Thank,
to Marshall, Manuel, John Jossi, and Chris by telephone for being with us, and of course our guest Guy Schumann from Luxembourg. Once again, goodbye from the space show. Everybody have a great week. Thank you again.